Well, I think we should probably talk a little bit about Joe Alt and his performance so far. Well, not this season really, because I know you and Ollie talked about him week one, and he was so
He
good
was
in
good.
that
He
game
was very
against
good.
Max Crosby, and this one was a little bit of a struggle for him. And I think I came away from watching him against T.J. Watt, which was a matchup that got a lot of buzz going into it. It was like, how are we going to see how he did? We saw how he did against Max Crosby. Now he's got T.J. Watt. And I felt no worse about Alt, despite the fact that he had a pretty tough day at the office. I thought he was really good. And I don't think in this game necessarily it showed up all that much. But when you watch how Watt won, it was like, well, yep, you're going to get beat against a guy who perfectly times up the snap and dumps
Yes.
off the ball the way that
Yes.
he did in this game. Like, it is hard to combat that other than maybe improve your timing a little bit. I was texting with Brandon Thorne about it, a friend of ours who obviously is an O-line expert, and he was just like, I mean, I think maybe he can get off the ball a little bit quicker. I do think sometimes with Alt, his pass sets end up sort of his own thing rather than like a true 45 set or a true vertical set.
Mm.
But I'm very worried to criticize that because he's played so much and is such a good player that like perhaps he's found things that work for him and it just maybe didn't against Watt. And I think it did for a lot of ways against Crosby, but Watt's wide alignments maybe threw off some of that footwork. I think he can gain more ground in his first step against those alignments. But I'm
Hmm.
really nitpicking, and I really had to like watch closely to see like what would I critique about this. The thing was in this game, he actually hardly ever went against Watt one on one. I know everybody was looking forward to that. I counted when I went through and kind of charted, I had 4 reps that were true pass sets where it was him and Watt one on one without chip help. And now they matched up probably 14 times in the game, maybe, but he had chip help all the time. Tight
Hmm.
end would block Watt. Watt would have to get past that guy. Then he engaged all, and the ball came out too. I mean, this was, I think in this game, Chargers quarterbacks were 2.65 seconds was the time to throw. So the ball was not sitting in
That's
there.
quick.
Ball
Yeah.
was coming out consistently. And they slid protection to Watt at times too. A guard would take away any inside moves that he had one time that helped Alt out. But on the 4 times they were one on one in an island, I thought Watt won all 4 of those reps. He gave up one sack. Alt gave up one sack. He had 2 pressures. He had a holding penalty to prevent a sack. The speed dip and rip rush gave Alt the biggest issue. It was almost all outside hip stuff
Yep.
in that game. And so yeah, being on an island just 4 times and losing the last one was like a long arm push pull pressure. I think is something that we'll have to keep an eye on with Alt because the big question with him, right, is just like I think in a lot of ways is if guys get into his frame, what does that look like for him? And that was the only one where I felt like that really happened with him. There wasn't a lot of bull rush situations in this game. So I think Watt's just that good off the ball and against wide alignments with a player as quick as he and explosive as he is when he does time up the snap well. I think Alt's going to have to alter some things, but saw it more as like he'll go back to the tape and he'll like mentally he'll know what to do in those situations rather than he's just really flawed physically in a certain way.
Yeah, this was not nearly as rough of a game as I thought that it was going to be for him. I agree with you. And Watt had a decent amount of success, good success, I would say, against basically like all of the non-TJ Watt reps that he went up against. It was just the fact that same thing, man. I'm watching these TJ Watt reps, and there were so many times that I would have to just like click the frame back and forth. I'm like, is he off sides? Like, is he going early here? And he's not. It's just TJ Watt, a future first ballot Hall of Famer, is just
Nobody figures out snap counts better than TJ Watt in the entire league.
and he
just
not
figured
only
them
does
out.
he figure the snap count out, but like even before he hasn't figured it out yet, he's looking at the ball, and the second that thing barely moves from the center's hands, he takes off. He is off. And I think this was much less of a, ooh, Joe Alt, not a great game, and much more of a, all right, this is what it's like to go up against a top-tier pass rusher in the NFL who was game planning for exactly the ways to beat you. I don't mean to take anything away from Max Crosby, but Crosby's going up against Alt when there's no NFL tape on him, nothing like that. You know TJ Watt was able to watch Joe Alt over the last couple of weeks. And I think really attacking the outside shoulder consistently, there's a reason why he continued to do that going after Alt, because I agree with you, and I agree with Brandon. There were times when I watched Alt and I go, yeah, okay, your first kick step, you're kind of like, he was planting hard. Like he was
Mhm.
really like he was launching out of his stance with that first step and he was stretching a decent amount, but Joe Alt really has never had like this deep stretch when he's been in a 45 or a vertical set. But that first step was hitting the ground really hard, like he was really bracing himself to still be able to play with power. And sometimes when you see guys who know they have to take on a speed rusher who's coming from a really wide alignment like Watt was, you won't see them, stomp the ground as hard to like still have a lot of pressure on them. You will be more light on your feet. You are first step, and once you hit the ground, you're still on your toes because you're immediately trying to kick slide even further. Alt didn't really do that, so I thought to myself, okay, maybe you could play a little bit lighter on your toes, but honestly, it was just a tip of the cap. I don't know how many right tackles would have been able to stop TJ Watt with how he had the snap count timed last week and just how quickly he gets off the ball and how quickly he is just into the shoulder and the arm comes up for the rip. I mean, he is either drawing a penalty or he is getting around you. He's just that good. He's just too good for it. The one takeaway that I actually had about this matchup is a bit of an issue that I had with Alt when I was grading him as a prospect is he does have a little bit of a tendency to be a waist bender and to kind of get a lot of his weight onto his toes when he is facing guys who win the arm length battle against him. And he sort of has to lean further to get his arms into a position to lock onto the players. And TJ Watt, I just looked this up, his arm length percentile was like 88th percentile. And so that last rep that you talked about that he lost, that sort of full extension, little push-pull that TJ Watt was able to do, the reason why he's able to execute that as well as he is, in my opinion, is because Watt was a little too ahead of his skis. He had too much weight on his toes. Therefore, that made it very easy for Watt to pull him on the push-pull and get him to the side and get him off balance. So that is a little thing to monitor about Joe Alt moving forward, is something I saw at Notre Dame that Watt was able to attack, just having longer arms and forcing Watt to kind of bend the waist and lose a little bit of balance and power that normally you'd have in your hamstrings and your butt and your lower back if you're able to sit back a little bit further when you have those longer arms. So just something to mention.
And yeah, the best way to improve that as a pass protector is to get really good with your hands and savvy with your hands. So when guys try to reach you, you're knocking their hands down, you're swatting them aside, you're getting guys off balance. And that isn't something Alt necessarily has done a ton of yet. So that is a key point of his development for sure, and pretty common point of development for young tackles. I think that concern shows up in the run game too at times with him. Just he will step into a block, but he will not necessarily protect his frame all the time, or he'll get outreached at the point of attack. I think he needs to be just a little more sudden and urgent with his hand usage. He is awesome in space. He is going to be a really good puller. Like all those things are definitely going to be true about him. But when you ask him to move somebody off the line of scrimmage, I think as a single block, I think that is going to be something that needs to develop over time with him. He have that game-changing power aspect to his game, and the violence in his hands, can that be more of a calling card for him? Because the baseline skill set is so good, you already know he's going to be like a plus starter. The question is he going to be an elite all-pro type of player? And to me, those are the things that he'll need to do better in order to reach that level.